Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Moments. My name is Linda Golick. I'm the Health and Wellbeing e-marketing strategist for Bellin Health, and so happy that all of you are able to join us today. We've been doing this webinar series for a while now, and your feedback has been really great. We have a couple questions that you've submitted, and we'll get to those today. And as always, I am joined by Charles Latour. Charles is our behavior health specialist. So, Charles, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Doing well, doing well. So the last time that we were together, the last couple times, we've really been exploring stress, and we've been working on recognizing it, looking at it in different ways so that our bodies and our minds feel less threatened by it. And today, we are really going to focus on growing from the stress. And I know, Charles, sometimes when I hear that, I think, oh, I don't know if I really appreciate the growth that comes from stress. But why is that important for us to really move into that mindset as far as dealing with our stress?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really great reasons to. The main thing is without growth, we're stagnant for one thing. But more than anything else, the whole idea of the growth mindset is science-driven. I mean, science is telling us that this is the best thing for us. And I think even if it's okay time-wise, I'll jump into some of that right now, if that's all right.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay, so here's what we have recently found out and why what we're talking about is so critical. It's in its own way mind-boggling, and the recent science has been so helpful in this, it's amazing. So if you think of it, what we've found out and why what I'm going to say I think is so important is this. We grow in different ways. Three ways. One, biologically, what we're biologically driven for. Secondly, through experience. But thirdly, and maybe most importantly, in my opinion, is how we code the particular experience. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like and then how what I just described occurs. So if you think of all of us on the call as professionals, we all graduated high school at some point, right? And then we go to a reunion. Let's say it's 5 years later, our 5-year reunion. Everybody from our high school graduating class that we are with in that reunion, most of them look similar. That I remember Linda, I remember Mary Lou, I remember Abby. You guys all look exactly the same. You go to your 10-year reunion, all of a sudden these people start looking different. Some you can't even make out. You go 5 years out, 5 years after that, people start looking fairly differently. Amazingly enough, some look exactly the same. Mary Lou hasn't aged since the day I met her 21 years ago. And by the way, this isn't just an example, that's true of Mary Lou. So I met her 21 years ago, she looks exactly the same. So she's practicing what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is this. We have this biological predisposition, but genetics only loads the gun. Environment is what actually activates what we are genetically predisposed for. And from there, the reason that some people look like they're 40 when they're 60, and some people look like they're 60 when they're 40, is all about something called chromosomes or telomeres and how we relate to them. So I'm going to say one last thing about it, and then we can talk more with it. But telomeres respond to stress. And as a result, stress informs aging, stress affects aging, and what we found more than anything else in the last 10 years is that we can affect our aging and our lifespan, and the difference between lifespan and health span. So we don't want to just live to be 100, we want to live to be a healthy 100. So our health span is as important as our lifespan, and nothing affects that more than our telomere health, and nothing affects our telomere health as much as our stress and the way we code it. So with that as the backdrop, and that's the scientific answer to your first question.
And I think that's so important to note as well, Charles, because it really connects to all the dimensions of well-being that we like to touch on. So having that health, having that good quality of life is more than just the physicality. That's why the mental well-being is so incredibly important, because it does affect us physiologically. So really cool.
Yeah, it's so right that we don't have the physical health without the mental health. We used to think it was the other way around. What health is our biggest focus, but hopefully we could have some good mental health on top of it. But what we know now is the mental health is the same as our physical health. In fact, it's aiding it if we could think of it that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we have spent a lot of time in these webinars kind of touching on the idea of becoming the best version of ourselves at the moment. That's been a big focus for us. And so if we're looking to really grow from the stress, talk to us about that. What is it that we need to be doing to really become that best version, to get that growth from the stress that we're experiencing?
The coding of it. The growth comes from how it's coded, how we interpret it, how we internalize it, and our experience that way with regard to did we see this, and it's something I will weave in is this dynamic of threat stress response versus something that I'm going to get through. So when we are coding something as something to get through rather than something that is a threat to me, that distinction or that differentiation is the difference between our coding. And I'll tell you about an experiment that actually, by the way, just for reference point, there's a researcher, and her name is Elizabeth Blackburn. She won a Nobel Prize for the science that I'm referring to and how critical and important this has been. But I'll tell you what really happened and how the psychological component became so critical in this. She was studying the aging process, and there's a great TED Talk that she has, which is How Cells Age, the Science of the Aging Cell. But she met up with a psychologist named Alyssa Appel. And this researcher asked her, have you thought about how psychology affects aging? She said she never thought of it. And then even more specifically, how stress affects aging. And said, again, I had never thought of it. So what they decided to study was a particular group of people who would experience pronounced and prolonged stress. Prolonged as in this wasn't going to go away, it's not today, it's not tomorrow, this is over time. And they thought of a group that would experience something like that. And they decided to study single mothers of children on the spectrum, autistic spectrum. And they wanted to study telomere levels. And by the way, telomeres, for those of you on the call that might not be familiar, the best way to think of them is like the aglets at the end of your shoelaces. That is, they wear down, your shoelaces become less effective. In fact, sometimes they become useless. All of our chromosomes have these telomeres at the end, just like our shoelaces. And as they wear down, we age. And as I said before, nothing wears them down more than stress. So as a result, so they wanted to study length of telomeres on people experiencing pronounced and prolonged stress. So they studied mothers, single mothers of autistic children on the spectrum, and what they found was a certain group just had over time the definitive shortening of telomeres, fairly drastic aging, so on and so forth. Another group seemed to have little to no impact whatsoever on the length of the telomeres. Amazing. Like, how could the same situation bring about such extreme differences in the effect on the telomeres? And what they found was the group that had little to no effect on their telomeres were the moms who every day found this to be something that they were going to look at and say, here's my newest challenge for the day. I am going to enjoy this challenge, and I'm going to make the most of this day, and I'm going to experience for what it's worth and enjoy my time with my son. So it's the outlook and then the coding of the experience to be grateful for whatever we went through, regardless of how difficult it may have been. So we are actually growing psychologically for how well we get through these experiences, or we are not. And when we are not only not growing, we are also accelerating our aging because of the way we looked at, experienced, and then coded and responded to stress. So at the end of the day, when you put the things that we've talked about over the last 3 sessions of stress, this is like the definitive study that really encapsulates everything we're talking about, that at the end of the day, it isn't the external stress that you experience, but whether or not you let that external stress become internal distress. And the better you can keep it external is almost all a function or byproduct of what psychologically, what skills you are using to deal with it. And that's why we come down to either growth or aging. We're going to have a little bit of both anyway, but why roll the dice? Why not make it definitive that I want it to be the growth outcome? So that's the science behind the psychological growth. And one last thing I'll say about it is, with that, when we know we've had the capacity to get through even the most difficult things, that not only increases our growth, but also the capacity to build resilience, because every time we experience a resilience, what I call a micro win, we can say, yeah, and I can do that again, and I can do that again. It just builds our strength as we grow. It's this virtuous cycle of we keep getting better, and that's what growth is all about. How we're better tomorrow than today, better today than yesterday, in this virtuous cycle of getting better based on our experiences rather than based on our experiences going the other way. That's what it comes down to.
You know, I often think about one of the things that I think can help people, and this will help you give yourself credit for everything that you've weathered up to this point, is to truly look behind you. You know, think about what you have overcome, think of the challenges that you're already working through. Now, I've had people in my life that have said, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And something I've learned to say to them is, you already are. You're already getting through it. You're already doing it. So just kind of that affirmation of, we're all doing this all the time. And I also think about how growth is, it's either you're growing or you're staying the same. So we want to be growing so we can use those opportunities around us to help us grow and to bolster that growth.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I had wanted to talk about in relation to this is the decisions we make and how we're approaching those. And I'm still bolstered by the great questions that people have put in over time during the course of these. And one was around decisions about things that I do and eat and so forth. And stress is like the great negator of our great decisions. but how we approach stress can make those more advantageous to us than problematic. So even on that note, I'd like to give one example of it in this growth moment or in our growth process. So I like to work with this psychological concept or construct of mind sight, which is mind sight, and this is, I think, what is critical to our approach in just about everything. But mind sight is basically the awareness of when we are making decisions. And our decisions could be to different stimulus, either incredibly reactive, I call them blind reactions, or wisely well thought out, chosen responses. So with regard to stress, we want to create that capacity, and I call it the acquired capacity, because at the end of the day, we're not really hardwired for this. I mean, I often talk about this concept, which is we are actually, as people, human beings, are more hardwired for survival than we are hardwired for great mental health. So our capacity to hardwire ourselves for great mental health, we have to acquire and go and get that. So in part of doing that is understanding our mind sight, and when we're making blind reactions that we don't even fully realize or recognize, or when we're making these very well-chosen, wise responses to a stimulus, and whatever that may be. So when we are in the mode of a wisely chosen response rather than a blind reaction, we are in a much more mindful place in making decisions that help us grow than help us be stressed and possibly not growing or even regressing. So at the end of the day, mind sight is one of the key mechanisms or strategies that we can use to be growth-oriented, a growth mindset, an open mindset, rather than blindly reacting to the stressors around us and on the autopilot of life. So I think that, to me, is one of the most essential things that people can utilize when they're in a growth-oriented place.
And you think about the different things that we kind of might tend to get into that autopilot with, right? So if we're able to take a moment and stop and really think about what kind of response we want to have, that's where we start to make some progress, right?
Exactly. But it's not, so there's a double-edged sword to that. First of all, you're exactly right. The autopilot is great. We want autopilot when it's working for us. So if we always had to relearn to tie our shoe every day and we didn't have the heuristic value of what we already know, if we didn't know to stop at a stop sign every time and had to relearn that, autopilot 95% of the time is our best friend. It's what makes life easy so we don't always have to think these things through. What we want to be able to know, and to me the ultimate part of growth is having the awareness of what in my autopilot is serving me so great that I not only love the way it is, it's just so helpful to me, and what are some of those things that I might be able to fine-tune and change a little bit to help in the way I deal with my stress responsive. When we can get to that level of psychological sophistication and outlook and investment in making those growth changes, we are on a road. To me, it's always this process, this path of, am I on the path to being the best me possible, the best version of me, the best dad possible, the best wife possible, the best mom possible, the best coworker possible. That is when we're in that growth mindset and we're doing things steadily down that path, that's when we are most fulfilled. When we don't feel that we're in consonance with that, that's when we feel most ill at ease, we're uncomfortable. We know there's something we'd like to adjust, we just haven't made the adjustment. And each time we have that blind reaction and it didn't work for us, that's what winds up in my office is I can't believe I said this again. I can't believe I did this again. I said I would never do that again. Those types of things when people haven't been able to make those growth adjustments or the ones who feel almost uncomfortable, and then they find that the autopilot is so strong that even when they want to make the change, it's difficult to do, and that's where a lot of the work comes in. So the autopilot of life, either a best friend or it could be one of our greatest enemies.
And so it's up to all of us to figure that out, right? For all of us to really think about, well, where are the areas in our lives where, boy, I'm on autopilot and that's really not working for me. It's really not working for me when I react this way, or every time I get upset about something, I do this. That's where that growth comes in, right, Charles?
Yeah, I think it is understanding where I make the adjustment. Where am I going to get better? What am I going to do that's going to say, okay, whether it's because my wife told me, my kids told me, my coworker told me, I just thought, where am I going to get better and how am I going to do it? And what's my strategy? Without that stagnation, with that's what I call self-directed neuroplasticity. Me making sure that my experiences are going to make me better rather than leave my experiences and how I code them to chance. So in other words, when it really comes down to it, growth periodically may happen unintentionally, but the vast majority of growth comes deliberate and intentional, and us wanting to be able to do it and finding the mechanisms and the strategies and the help to be able to do it. That's why it's so essential that we become mindful, we become deliberate, we become intentional, because without that, we're leaving growth to chance, and when it's left to the roll of the dice, in all great likelihood, it's not going to happen. Actually, it's the opposite. We're just going to strengthen pathways that we don't want to go down, but we make it more likely we'll go there anyway. That's the difference.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So I did have a couple of questions that were submitted today, so I just want to get to those. And then if any of you in the audience have a question right now, feel free to click on that chat feature. You can either send them to myself, Linda Golick, or you can make them visible to everybody. It's up to you, but Charles is definitely here to answer your questions if you would like. So the first question we had submitted, Charles, was, what's the best way to handle stress when you're not in control of the situation?
I thought you were going to say when you're not in control of your emotions, but you threw me a curveball at the end. Not in control of the situation. So there's a couple different things I would say. That probably more than anything else, and there's a lot of these. We can't control traffic, for example, is one of the most stressful things that people say. I'm from Houston, Texas, one of the most problematic traffic places in the world. Technology sometimes can create stress, things that we're not in control of. So anybody who could think of those situations, I can't control what's happening around me. So using that example of external stress, how do I keep it from becoming internal distress, managing stress that way? The main thing that I would say is the best thing that you can do, one, is to employ the 3 areas of focus that we've talked about interchangeably or even specifically. To, one, be able to manage yourself physiologically, the deep breath, anything that you can activate. We call it the difference between top-down management, which is psychologically into the body, or bottom-up, which is from the body into the mind. So when we're doing something like a deep breath, it's both. So that deep breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, dampens down the stress, that even if traffic doesn't change or the technology doesn't change or the situation doesn't change, we have. So utilize that. Something behavioral is I'm just going to say, you know what, I can't change the traffic, but I could turn on the radio, or I can listen to a TED Talk, or I can call somebody. Something that I can do behaviorally that gains control rather than accepts that I don't have control. What can we? And then psychologically, the capacity and the intentionality to be able to say, okay, this situation might not be great, but how I handle it, I can be, and I want to look back and say I handled that really stressful situation that I couldn't change great, and that's what I leave with myself with psychologically. So you're doing those three things. Any one of those would help, and I would say the breath focus or something immediately physiologically helping you, even if it's like if you're stuck in traffic, being able to take your pulse. What we monitor, we modify. So we're modifying our stress just by being aware when we make that change. So that modification helps just by that simple intervention. So physiologically, behaviorally, psychologically.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that breath is such
Speaking
a good
of beautiful question too. Whoever put that in, that is fantastic. So, sorry, Linda.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. I was just going to say that a mindfulness activity I became aware of just recently is to use your 5 senses. So pick out 5 things in your environment that are the same color. Then pick out 4 things that you can feel. Pick out 3 things that you can hear. So by tuning your brain and your attention into these other things, it just kind of calms you. And I find that when I do that, I can literally feel myself just getting calmer in the moment.
That is so awesome. Let me double click on that a second because that is so great. Each one of those are examples of that going in from a place of safety, a place of cool. Anytime we're doing anything senses-oriented, that is helping us. Smell is one of the best ones, and like just going into nature is that way. That's something behavioral, but it's really physiological when it's senses-related. Anything we do in that regard is aiding our stress by going in that direction. So that is all awesome. Do we have time for one more, or are we out?
We have a couple more. I think, we're good on time. So the next one says, please give ideas on how to build a successful remote team culture. I'm finding the introverts on my team have almost disappeared from interaction. I don't know if they're okay. I don't know what they're doing. I'm feeling disconnected. We're just not used to being a team that goes out of their way to be warm with each other. Those kinds of interactions happen personally, and we're enough in context of working in proximity. So how can we work on this without feeling weird about it? So any ideas on that one, Charles? Kind of building that team culture in these crazy times we have.
Well, speaking of great questions, I mean, the last one was awesome. This is awesome in its own right, and I almost think could be its own separate conversation all the way around, because when you're talking about culture, that word alone is, you could do like 3-day culture building workshops. But in this case, I think we're all challenged in how we interact, how we communicate, how we have opportunity to learn and grow, not only individually but as teams. And I think what this person, whoever submitted the question, is looking at is, in this challenge time, can we still do this? And I say it's more difficult and it takes more intentionality, but absolutely, positively, yes. But what it involves is still being able to be curious, be interested, cultivate conversation even when it's not as easy to do. If I heard the word right in there, did you say understanding dreams was one of the questions or parts of the question?
Just the idea of that their team isn't typically like a warm and fuzzy kind of team, and those interactions used to happen when they were more in proximity. So I'm guessing these are a team that's working a little bit more remotely, and they're just a little bit more concerned about the introverts in particular and keeping that connection.
Yeah, okay. Because I thought you said something about dreams. There's a guy named Matthew Kelly who has a book called The Dream Manager, and states that one of the things that we should always be able to do as coworkers, and it doesn't have to be my ultimate dream, but understanding some of the intentions, the investments, what are some of my aspirations, goals, and dreams in the work that I do, and do as a manager, do I understand my people well enough to even want to know that? And at the end of the day, do I feel like I'm helping support that? That we are on the same page, that I get you. I get everything about you, and I'm invested in you. I'm not only here for my own success, I'm here for yours too. And as teammates, part of the things that I find that we lose when we don't have time to interact, and I'm saying this on two levels. One, even when we're all working together, but we're all too busy, we don't have a chance to connect. Secondly, is in this time that we're in where we're spread apart, what we don't really have is this feeling, and maybe this is where we could go to in the next meeting, but I want to just roll this out. Here's the dynamic. Most teams that work great together, part of the reason they're great is because I've got my back all the time, but I've also got yours. There's nothing that's going to, I am as interested in Mary Lou's success as I am in mine, sometimes even more. I always want her to do well, look good, be great. We have our arms locked, right? But here's the deal. Under stress, what teams do is we unlock arms. Even though I said I got your back and our arms are locked, under stress, guess what happens? I need to take care of my own stuff. I can't worry about your stuff. I'm up to here. I got to do this. So under stress, all of a sudden, I don't have her back as much, our arms aren't locked, and we're not interacting, and I'm back on autopilot doing my own thing, back to the autopilot world. Unless we have a mechanism around how we have communicated, or I intentionally know, I don't care how stressed I am, I still have your back and our arms are locked. Stress, difficulty, adversity, we cover our own butt, but we don't cover someone else's. But if we're intentional and we have mechanisms to stay connected, stay communicated, check in, one thing that we found even is that something we talked about in the last conversation, oxytocin, we don't get to have it as much because we're divided and separated, not only by function, but of distance and geographics as well. Being able to look at someone's eyes, even on screen, an extra 5 seconds still brings out that oxytocin, and that we can use the mirror neurons connection to make sure I'm still with you. I'm still here. I might be in a different room. I might be in a different building. I might be at home, but I see you and I'm with you. That type of messaging can help keep teams brought together. But again, there's a thousand other directions we could approach this from. And I love that we're talking not only individual, but teams. Because if you remember, one last thing I'll say, one of the earliest meetings, resilient people not only make themselves resilient, they pass it on. A rising tide floats all boats. We want to have everyone's back and everyone locked arms, and that's what great teams do. So, great question.
Yeah, and I had two thoughts about that. I had the thought of, don't be afraid to reach out to your team members. Don't be afraid to ask the questions of, are people feeling connected? Are they feeling disconnected? Is there something else that they need to feel like their best self in their role? And then the other thought that I had in talking about this when you were talking about the stress and what that brings up for people, and maybe lessening the ability to be calm and patient and those types of things, we just need to also remember to offer each other some grace at this time. People are dealing with all sorts of different things in their lives, work, personal, whatever may be going on, and I think it's just important for us to just offer grace to each other whenever we can. I think that really goes a long way. And I had a comment from Wanda that said, we introverts often feel just fine not interacting with the team. So thank you for that feedback, Wanda. We appreciate that.
And I think that's a great call out. Just because we're not interacting doesn't mean we're not feeling part of. And regardless of introvert, extrovert, the ability to still stay connected and invested in each other, and it doesn't have to be huge. It's just the fact that we reached out. How are we all doing? What's going on? How are we all getting through this? Supporting, and even one little tidbit of information that we give to everybody, maybe even on the team, something, talking with the team earlier, that when we just make sure that we know people care, in and of itself is enough to lock arms.
Right, exactly. And that's why absolutely just reach out to people. I think that's a number one thing for us all to remember in our crazy busy lives. We had another question submitted, Charles. So this one is, what ways can you help a person who has had a bad autopilot to help rewire that process? Someone with a bad autopilot.
A bad autopilot? Before I jump in, let me, as I see this, that word grace is like so amazing. There's like 3 different levels to it. There's the grace that you're talking about, the grace with which we hold ourselves, those things. So I think if we even use that as one of the takeaways of the day, because it's like grace with others, but sometimes grace for ourselves, I think is key. But the autopilot, and I guess one thing I'll say in the interest of time before I forget it, everybody on the call, there's a great little 2-minute video on neuroplasticity that is about the difference between autopilot and intentionality, and we'll send that to everybody. This would be a very quick visual to what my answer will be, but it's the ability to be able to say, I know what I'm doing and I want to do something different, but I know it's not going to be easy. So I'll give you one example of how this works. Everybody on this call at some point in time has driven home, and they pulled in their driveway, and you don't know how you got home. Is that you know you drove home, but you don't remember going by the bank or the store. Or there's other times that you have even needed to. I mean, this has happened to me a couple of times. My wife might say, hey, can you grab a couple things? And I'll get home, and I'll be walking in, and she'll say, did you stop that? And I'll think, oh, gosh, I forgot all about it. You just went in, and at the end of the day, your autopilot took over. You got home. You don't even remember half the ride. So that's the strength of autopilot, for one thing, and why it's good. But neuroplasticity is making a change in developing a new way. So the metaphor I'll use is this. Look at a pathway, if you looked at a forest, the natural inclination we would have, if there's a path, that's the one we would go down, because that's easy. But to develop neuroplasticity and make a change means I'm going to start fresh in another direction. And the 2 metaphors that we're using is you're going to start a different path in the woods, or you're going to take a different way home. And it's a little bit different. It's like writing whatever your dominant hand is and then doing it differently. You can do it. It's not easy. It can look ugly. It's different, but you can do it. But it will take time, but as you do it, you develop different pathways. The key is to start and then stick with it because within 7 days you say it's easier to go to the one I was doing, which is why most diets fail within 7 days, which is why most exercise programs between 7 days and a month, we go back to what we were doing. It's to have the intentionality to start, the stick-to-itiveness to stay with it, and the resolve to move beyond the discomfort when it's different and more difficult than what was easy. And by the way, one last thing, I also see the amazing aspect of grace. I could say that in 2020, we could all say that could be the word of the year. So that's how incredible this year has been, and we all need that. So I love that comment.
We do.
But we'll send that video, I think, when everybody gets a chance to see it. If you watch it, it's the best 2 minutes I've ever seen on a very difficult concept, and I think people will love it.
Awesome. Perfect. Yes, we will absolutely. We'll send out this recording along with a link to that video. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. We just have a couple minutes till we're done with our time today, but thanks for taking the time to be with us today. We'll continue these monthly segments, so continue to watch for those invitations, and also check out our Lifesaver Wellbeing page at bellin.org/lifesaver. And if you know anyone else that would like an invite to this, you can feel free to send us an email. You can email us at wellnessconsultant@bellin.org. So, Charles, any parting thoughts for today before we dismiss everyone?
Yeah, I have three, but I want to end on grace. One I want to say is enjoy neuroplasticity. Enjoy how you decode and then code your stress, because the telomeres are always listening. The body is always open to what the mind is telling it, which is why I say the body achieves what the brain believes. When this is in your mind, your body is always listening and internalizing it more than we ever know. And again, wrapping up with grace. Thank you for everybody on the call, and good luck applying what we're talking about theoretically to your actual daily lives. And thank you for everybody being on the call today.
Thank you, Charles. Great to see everyone. Have a great rest of the day.